Welcome to this Fireside chat on the second Tuesday of 2022. The smoothness of this recording is ably and skillfully facilitated by John and Mary Phillips, while either Terry Boyd or David Skinner have uploaded it to our YouTube channel where you found us. It is all a smooth process for which I am most grateful because it gives me liberty just to create them. Thank you, all four of you. Speaking of keeping things clean, the holiday season may well have taught our canine companions new opportunities for extra treats after meals. For the rest of us, with ongoing health protocols and the schools closed, at least till Monday next week, our emotional stress levels may need this. For people like me, New Year's resolutions are littered on the living room floor, even 9 days after the New Year's celebrations wound up. As a result, here is a proper commemoration of the result. Epiphany was just last Thursday, which is when we commemorate the visit of the Magi. If the Magi's visit was in pandemic times, perhaps this would be the conversation prior to entering the house where Mary, Joseph, and Jesus stayed. Or maybe more accurately, this took place before they entered. In fact, many of us are struggling because we thought our so-called normal was beginning to return. Yet we do well to remember being happy doesn't mean we have it all. It simply means we're thankful for all that we have. The revelation in this season of Epiphany is that Christmas isn't over. Instead, the good news means something more, as Howard Thurman writes in his poem, The Mood of Christmas. When the song of the angels is stilled, when the star in the sky is gone, when the kings and the princes are home, when the shepherds are back with their flock, the work of Christmas begins to find the lost, to heal the broken, to feed the hungry, to release the prisoner, to rebuild the nations, to bring peace among the people, and to make music in the heart. It is quoted in our Voices United hymn book, hymn number 87, I am the light of the world. In reality, Jesus' birth was not painted with rainbows and butterflies. As the author of the book A Wrinkle in Time, Madeleine L'Engle, wrote, there is no time for a child to be born, with the earth betrayed by war and hate, and a nova lighting the sky to warn that time runs out and the sun burns late. That was no time for a child to be born in a land in the crushing grip of Rome. Honor and truth were trampled by scorn, yet here did the Savior make his home. When is the time for love to be born? The inn is full on planet Earth, and by greed and pride the sky is torn, yet love still takes the risk of birth. In the escape of Mary and Joseph and Jesus to the relatively safer country of Egypt, they were no less refugees than people all over the world trying to escape terror, brutality, and oppression. The Holy Family, just like all of us, need to depend on one another just as we do during this pandemic. As the late South African Archbishop Desmond Tutu once said, we are made to exist in a delicate network of interdependence. We are sisters and brothers, whether we like it or not. To treat anyone as if they were less than human, less than a brother or a sister, no matter what they have done, is to contravene the very laws of our humanity. And those who shred the web of interconnectedness cannot escape the consequences of their actions. Indeed, echoing the Southern African spiritual philosophy of Ubuntu, Tutu also said, "My humanity is bound up in yours, for we can only be human together." When we feel isolated and alone during increased pandemic health protocols, Tutu reassures us. We are not responsible for what breaks us, but we can be responsible for what puts us back together again. Naming the hurt is how we begin to repair our broken parts. However, considering the perspective of Ubuntu, we must not look to blame others for what hurts us, no matter how temptingly easy that may be. Instead, Tutu has further wisdom for us. When we see others as the enemy, we risk becoming what we hate. When we oppress others, we end up oppressing ourselves. All of our humanity is dependent upon recognizing the humanity in others. We are very much interdependent. Therefore, we need to depend upon one another in community. Consider this countercultural story. There was a farmer who grew excellent quality corn. Every year, he won the award for the best grown corn. One year, a newspaper reporter interviewed him and learned something interesting about how he grew it. The reporter discovered that the farmer shared his seed corn with his neighbors. The reporter asked, "How can you afford to share your best seed corn with your neighbors when they are entering corn in competition with yours each year?" That's what the reporter asked. "Why, sir," said the farmer, "didn't you know the wind picks up the pollen from the ripening corn and swirls it around from field to field? If my neighbors grow inferior corn, cross-pollination will steadily degrade the quality of my corn. If I am to grow good corn, I must help my neighbors grow good corn." So it is with our lives. Those who want to live meaningful and well must help enrich the lives of others. For the value of a life is measured by the lives it touches. In fact, those who choose to be loved must help others to find loving relations. For the welfare of each is bound up in the welfare of all. Call it the power of collectivity. Call it a principle of success. Call it a law of life. The fact is, none of us truly wins until we all win. You may have noticed that I am quoting Archbishop Desmond Tutu a lot today. When he died on Boxing Day last year, I was deeply saddened. From my perspective, Tutu embodied the way we need to care for each other. Considering the story about the farmer sharing his seeds with his neighbors, here is another quote from Tutu. "Differences are not intended to separate, to alienate. We are different precisely in order to realize our need of one another." In fact, Tutu understood another revelation, another epiphany around a constantly and consistently oppressed group. If we are going to see real development in the world, then our best investment is women. When we seek those who are also feeling isolated and alone, we reflect this poem by Olga Grigorieva Krylova titled "The Wind." Tell your story, shout it, write it, whisper it if you have to, but tell it. Some won't understand it. Some will outright reject it, but many will thank you for it. And then the most magical thing will happen. One by one, voices will start whispering, "Me too." And your tribe will gather, and you will never feel alone again. We find ourselves community when we tell our story. For us as Christians, our story centers around a refugee family fleeing oppression for the relative safety of another country. There was hardship, exhaustion, fear, and worry. But there was also joy when they found sanctuary. Sanctuary for them was a safe place for loving one another so that joy bubbled forth. And there is joy in Tutu's life. The man who contained it all may rest, but the love of God that danced this earth, the justice of God that rang around this earth, the joy of God that laughed on this earth, these are the attributes of God that do not die. We choose only whether they will live on in us or die in us. Thank you, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, for teaching us the meaning of God's love. To put it into other words that were written by Emily Dickinson, if I can stop one heart from breaking, I shall not live in vain. If I can ease one life the aching, or cool one pain, or help one fainting robin into his nest again, I shall not live in vain. During his ministry, Jesus described love's lifestyle. In Matthew 25, Jesus describes true followers as being marked by a peculiar empathy toward the poor, the marginalized, and the incarcerated. However, he describes false followers as being outwardly religious, but marked by a peculiar callousness toward the poor, the marginalized, and the incarcerated. In thinking of that dichotomy, here's a thought. "365 opportunities. Okay, addressing the effects of this pandemic specifically, Indian author Arundhati Roy, who wrote the novel The God of Small Things, says this: what is this thing that has happened to us? It's a virus, yes. In and of itself, it holds no moral brief, but it is definitely more than a virus. It has made the mighty kneel and brought the world to a halt like nothing else could. Our minds are racing back and forth, longing for a return to normality, trying to stitch our future to our past, and refusing to acknowledge the rupture. But the rupture exists. And in the midst of this terrible despair, it offers us a chance to rethink the doomsday machine we have built for ourselves. Nothing could be worse than a return to normality. Historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine the world anew. We can choose to walk through it, dragging our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our data banks and our dead ideas, our dead rivers and smoky skies behind us. Or we can walk through lightly with little luggage, ready to imagine another world, ready to fight for it. Again, 2 quotes from Desmond Tutu. God's dream is that you and I and all of us will realize we are family, that we are made for togetherness, for goodness, and for compassion. Furthermore, as we see our strength together, do your little bit of good where you are. It's those little bits of good put together that overwhelm the world. As a final exclamation point to the need for us to put these little bits of good together, here is a video featuring the United States Air Force Band. They are covering the song written by Ruth Moody of the Wailing Jennings. I will admit that it does seem ironic such a song is so well performed by a military force. Change happens one step at a time, I guess.
This is the sound of one voice, one spirit, one voice, the sound of one who makes a choice. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of voices too. The sound of me singing with you, helping each other to make it through. This is the sound of voices too. This is the sound of voices too. This is the sound of voices three, singing together in harmony, surrendering to the mystery. This is the sound of voices three. This is the sound of voices three. This is the sound of all of us, singing with love and the will to trust. Leave the rest behind and turn to dust. This is the sound of all of us. This is the sound of all of us. This is the sound of one voice, one people, one voice, a song for every one of us. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of one voice, one people, one sound of one voice.
For our prayer today, I want to read you a poem by Michael Traveler titled By the Water's Edge. Immerse yourself in the landscape these words inspire, a place where God infuses all of creation, where the Spirit is the interconnection and interdependence of God's own self. There's a place where I can hear the birds sing, the wind whispering in the canopy above, a place where the water ripples over small stones and rocks in the stream of my ancestors, a place where the breeze brushes softly through my hair, caresses my face, a place where I can hear my heart beating, see my soul running through the woods along the stream, and just for a moment, for an instant, or maybe for the afternoon, sit for a while by the water's edge with you, talk with you, not about anything in particular, just sit with you here among your creation and listen to the birds above and the wind in the trees and the water rippling by, and all the while with you by my side. Amen. In this season after Epiphany, when we ponder the deeper revelations of good news to all people, I hope you have encountered the reality of good news within you as I have explored some of Archbishop Desmond Tutu's legacy. Before we depart, I want to leave you with a blessing for this new year that is taken from Birgit Anna McNeil's book, The Wild Path, Foraging, Wild Medicine, and Nature Connection. Think of this as a particularly spiritual embodiment that recognizes the interconnectedness we share with all of creation. May the stories of the old ones, the ancient ones, the land and the trees, the plants and the earth be whispered to you. May you warm your toes by the hearthside as the land starts to speak in the cold and old icy voice of winter. The voice that appears when we pass the midwinter mark, the voice that talks in stories of growth, of becoming, of new states, new slates, and brand new mossy gateways. May you be comforted by the fire that can be lit inside your body, by the light you hold inside, the light of love, forgiveness, and passion. Rest well, dear one. Warm your bones and listen in the silence, in the cold, for the rustling of truth-telling that comes from the earth and the air, the rustling of the newness that springs from the compost of the old. Until next week, take care, be well, and embrace possibility. Goodbye.